Hello, everybody. It's me. It's the Nutty Professor, and I'm back to wearing the mini hat. We started with this. This is the conclusion. So I've gone back to the mini hat, and this is, as I just showed you, hopefully the conclusion of the evaluating PATAP series. This is going to be part 4. Supposed to be a part 2 part, and I have a child being very civilized. This is Finn, and Finn is the one that I told you in the last podcast was named after a character from James Joyce novel because he likes to. He's a creative one in the family. He takes after his father. He's even who likes to write. He climbs on the keyboard and just presses keys, and then it looks like something that James Joyce would have written in Finnegan's Wake. And obviously, he's the one that also likes podcasting because he was all over the table now, and now he's sitting very nicely on the chair next to me while I am doing this. And his brother is just there. That's LCee. In the podcast, can remove this because I'm at home and just start with these. But in the podcast in which I named the substance, the street name for drugs one, I think it's podcast number 5 or 6, way back, 25 podcasts ago. But I did talk about LC in a different context, and the one of the street names for the substance that I was addicted to was C, the big C, sometimes. And so this one is the little C. He's addictive, but it's a positive. It's a rechanneling. And he was a cuddler. And the first day I got him, for 4 weeks old, it was all over me. So he became little cuddler LC and LCEE, LC. So, and the two brothers get along very well. I had a brother and sister a long time ago. They passed at age 14, 16, and they used to fight a lot. But these two, they really get along. They're the least Rashid-like of my family. They don't have tempers. They get along with other people. They're friendly. Well, they don't get to see a lot of people because sweetheart. This is LC now climbing all over these thingies. This is toxic. I keep telling you, don't be stupid. So at least the good thing is they're getting comfortable. Now, I want to finish this off because this is going on forever. But in the last podcast, I finished off PATAP. So we went through the stages, and now the whole thing is sort of evaluating them. As I said, it's worked. There were false starts, and it took a long time. But I made 11 months, and there's still no guarantees. Fools are still there, but as I said, these pushes, the ones that I've just introduced to you, are the strongest possible. And then also the COVID dangers and the lockdown and the vigilance, and you go out there and what are you doing out at night, and law enforcement, and then stuff is being mixed because of closed borders, and I've heard really horrendous stories of the things that have been happening. So you got all the pushes, and then you got the rechanneling, and you got the podcast, and all of this stuff, and everybody's struggling now, not just me, with the lockdowns. So we've got all kinds of stuff going on here, and that's one of the things that I mentioned, that I talk about pushes and pulls. We've done up a photo, one point photo the other, pushes and pulls. We talk about convergence. The various factors kind of came together there, and I decided to volunteer, and then volunteering led to fostering to adopting. I wasn't planning, because I already had one cat. I wasn't planning on, but as soon as I got them for the very first day, they're not going anywhere. they're children, and they knew it, and I knew it, and everybody knew it. So all of that converged. Now. My former student producer came to visit during the summer when lockdown was eased a bit, and they came to meet the babies, really, and he and his significant other, and I talked about how COVID and getting the babies had, had really helped me stay clean. And, otherwise it would have been, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks fall, and then less than that, and then, and it was very discouraging. And my student also, and he'd be like going, Prof, it's okay, you got to start all over again, you got to go back to zero, and I'd go 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and then it was kind of discouraging, But when everything converged and when they came to visit, I said, look, the getting the babies, volunteering to help the cats, and the COVID dangers have helped me go past that 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. And at that time, it was like 7, 8 months. Now we're almost 11 months. So, but he said, he and his girlfriend afterwards, he texted me and he said, Prof, we don't think it was just the external. You're not giving yourself enough credit because it's true that getting the babies helped. The podcasts. And I've thanked him because I couldn't have done these podcasts without him. But the podcasts have helped, analysts, all of these things that and the COVID dangers. But his point was that if you hadn't gone to volunteer, if you hadn't fostered, if you hadn't put all your energy into rechanneling into the children and treating them like children and looking after them and feeding them and all that and not wanting to be away for more than a couple of hours. If I hadn't done all of that, if I had, and the podcast also, the energy that I put into making them up and doing them with my organizing them and doing all of that. If I hadn't done that, and even the COVID dangers, I do know of people, and there was a person that I knew from that world, and I think I mentioned her or him in an earlier podcast, and this was the person that was very creative and had their own language, and they talked about slithering, and they talk about slithering there, dusty dumpster rodent weasels rather than addicts. They have the dusty dumpster rodent weasels and the slithering. And I did get a text from this person sort of early COVID, and the text was asking, are you slithering or are you snoozing? And I think snoozing was their word for quarantine, for isolation. And they said, I'm snoozing. I said, thank you, but I'm snoozing. I'm in quarantine. I'm completely clear. At that time, it would have been like 3 months, 2 months, So people have still been slithering, even in spite of the dangers and all of that stuff. There's still stuff going on out there, very dangerous, stuff being mixed. There's, people are getting desperate. I've heard that there's more violence in the world than there were in that underworld than there was before, So that whole thing in terms of, I thought about it. And there were two factors that came up. So yes, everything has to converge. There's internal and external stuff. In psychology, they take a bit attribution theory. Internal and external. I won't give them any lecture here. But the internal, I see it as motivation, So, and the two factors that I've added, the bottom one's there, motivation, so that's there are people that in spite of COVID are still partying, slithering, the daily users, in spite of all of the dangers, people who haven't got things to turn back for, so you have to be motivated, it's not rocket science. This is nothing earth-shattering. It's not a big revelation. Is that and I think most people that talk about quitting addictions talk about you have to really be motivated. But just from my own personal experience, I said, yeah, you can have all those external factors, and a global pandemic kind of helps, and fostering if you're a real cat person. And again, it's personalized. What's important to you? Cat's important to me. But I had to choose to volunteer and then foster all of that stuff. But you have to be motivated. And the second part of that is perseverance. Because as I said, there are falls. You go 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 2 months, and then there's a binge, and it's kind of disheartening, But it happens, and you have to keep going. Perseverance. That's my bottom one there. You have to keep going. You have to, and again, nothing new here. People say you have to stick to it. You have to, and the 12-step people also. You have you backslide, or you have a slip, and you go and you talk about it in the group. So that's part of the process. And but you have to. And I reminded my former student of in the textbook from one of the courses he took with me, critical thinking, and there was a chapter on creative problem solving, and the author talked about how creative problem solving is really it's sticking to it. There's some little cheesy statement like it's 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. See, you gotta perspire, you gotta persevere, you gotta stick to it. Now, all of this actually reminded me, while I was talking about motivation, it reminded me of a theory from my undergraduate, way back. And it was a behavioristic theory. It was Clark Howell and Edward Tolman. And they had a formula, and I thought of it because it deals with motivation and drive and strength of drive and incentive and all of that stuff. And it was and a lot of this was based on research in those days with rats, white rats, and I did my rat experiments too way back. But that was when psychology was more behavioristic. But the formula was E equals V times D times K times J minus I. So E is expectancy, expectancy value, the V is stimulus intensity, D is drive strength, K is incentive, J is the delay between behavior and reinforcer, unconditioned stimulus, if you're using the Pavlovian framework, and I is inhibitory factors. So I guess the dangers of COVID would be like inhibitory factors. Motivation, but it's like inhibition of stopping because of the dangers and stuff. So it's just a little behaviorism was always very reductionistic, and it was one thing, and they didn't go into a lot of the cognitive things, which we're now, but my approach has been more psychodynamic, not just conscious, but unconscious, and there's a little bit of, cognitive stuff in there, a little bit of behavioristic stuff in there, and it kind of applied because I was talking about, motivation, so, and I thought, oh, there's a theory with a formula with motivation, I looked it up. So it's 40 years since I've done that shit, So, so this has been my evaluation of my own system. It's kind of worked. There's no guarantees. 11 months, we're coming up on a year very, very soon. And that, by the way, is another incentive. Another incentive when the polls are there is like, I'm only a month away from a year. No matter how strong it is, I'm like going, I'm going for the year, and I'm going to keep going past it. I you've seen the babies. Wonderful they are. So they've got all the pushes. So this is the Nutty Professor, and I come back to my advice to others who can't go 12 steps or can't go the traditional clinical route. And I keep saying this. I go, if you can't go those routes, you kind of have to, it's harder, you kind of have to do what I did, but personalize it, you have to do what works for you, and you gotta realize that there's going to be falls, you gotta persevere, and you've got to really, and it's built into my system because the first couple of steps are about motivation, that turn back or not, and the reasons to turn back are how motivated are you, so that's and I'm going to keep going with, follow up. We're going to do some more mythology and psychology and art and literature, and I'm going to keep you posted on the addiction angle too. But for whatever it's worth, this is my personalized approach. It did work. but it took a lot, and it took a global pandemic. As my analyst said, you can't, order those on demand. But everything together, the convergence and the babies and the fostering and all of that stuff, and and the podcasts and the writing and the reading, all the stuff. 11 months and counting. Almost 11 months. I shouldn't say. I really shouldn't say 11 months because it's 3 or 4 days. It's going to be 11 months. So as I said, I don't say Merry Christmas, but I will say have a Merry Winter Solstice from the Nutty Professor and his furry family. Bye for now.